Okay, anyway, it's good to be back here tonight with you in God's house. We've come a long ways on this story of my life, something that I wanted to share with you. A very interesting story when we come to the conclusion tonight, so I'm going to have to hurry. I'm running kind of behind, but when we come to the conclusion tonight, there's 6 things that I want you to remember about this whole story. You remember we left off last week that I had sent my brothers back home to get their younger brother, and I even played with them a little bit. I put money back in their sacks, and when they got home, they found out they had the money, and my father, Jacob, was scared to send us back, but we told him they wanted Benjamin. Now, I didn't call Benjamin's name. I just said, your younger brother. When they got there, I asked them where they were from, if their father was still living, and if they had any other children. And they answered all 3 questions that I wanted to know, so I knew my family was intact, that everybody was fine. At this particular time, I was 30 years old, already 30 years old. So I'd been there for 13 years. A lot happened in 13 years. I learned a lot about Egypt. I learned the Egyptian language. I even, I don't know if I mentioned it last week, I even spoke to my brothers through an interpreter. I spoke the Egyptian language, and they didn't understand what I was saying, but I had somebody to interpret it and tell them what I was saying. You might say I was playing with them a little bit. They played with me a whole lot, didn't they? They played with me for real. I once heard a man here on earth that's living now talked about playing marbles. We didn't play marbles. I don't even know what he was talking about, but he said when they played for keeps. And then he explained to me that when they were playing marbles, who got the marbles out of the circle they had, they get to take them all home with them. But they all come back the next day and somebody would win them all back. But they played for keeps. Well, my brothers played for keeps in what they had done to me. And I sent my brothers back and I kept one of them with me. And I told him, he's going to stay right here. I'm going to keep Simeon. You've called your brother Simeon, and I'm going to keep him right here with me until you come back with your younger brother. I did not call him Benjamin. That would have been a giveaway. They would have asked me then, how do you know his name was Benjamin? I just said, your younger brother, because you told me you had a younger brother at home. Now bring your younger brother to see me. And when we told our father this, he was very upset. He said, I've already lost one son. He said, now they got Simeon, and now you want to take Benjamin, and Benjamin is the only thing that I've got left to remember Rachel by, because Joseph is already gone. Had somebody ask me, why are you wearing the coat of many colors? And it was shredded and taken back to your father. I said, well, it's a replica of it, and it's just for my respect that I show for my family and my father, even though I was the number 1 ruler in Egypt. While I was there, I was married. I married a priest's daughter. We had 2 sons, Ephraim and Manasseh. Both of them were good sons. They were part of what we would call the family of Israel now, because I was of Israel. They were good boys. But food didn't grow in the land of Canaan as it won't growing in Egypt, because there's a worldwide famine. It's been going on for 2 years now. I told my brothers later on that you got 5 more years. It's going to happen for 7 years. But we told our father, or they told my father, that we need to go back or we're going to starve to death. It's going to wipe us out, and it's the only way that we can get food. We can't grow food here in the land of Canaan. We need to do exactly what this ruler told us to do, or we're going to die. We need to take Benjamin back with us. And Judah spoke up, and he told our father, Jacob, he said, send Benjamin with me. He said, and we'd go down at once. And if something happens to Benjamin, when I come back, you can lay it on my life the rest of my life, if that's what it takes. Knowing the situation, Jacob prayed about it. He talked to God about it. And we told him they told him, said if we hadn't wasted all this time already, we could have already been there and got food and come back, and we'd have had Simeon back and everything would have been fine. But he said, okay, I'm going to let you go. So he sent them back to me. Now, he sent them back with big intentions. Not only did he send them to get food, he sent balm, he sent honey, he sent spices, he sent pistachio nuts, which are really good to eat. And he sent almonds, and he told us to take back twice as much money as we took before, because our money had been put back in our sacks. So we're repaying you the money, and then we're going to take this other money and buy the food that we need. So we give him back the money that was returned to us. So when they come back, and they did, I saw Benjamin with them. Now they don't know me, but I know them. And here's my baby brother, Benjamin, that I love so dearly. And I saw Benjamin, and I told the servant in charge, I said, bring him into my house. I told him to kill an animal, and today at noon we're going to have a feast at my house. And my servant did as I asked him to do, and he brought the men to my house. They were kind of afraid when, instead of meeting where we'd been meeting before, that my servant said, we're going to Joseph's house. He wants to meet you there. Well, we were thinking then, well, maybe they're bringing us there because of the money that we had in our sacks. And now he's tricked us, and he wants to attack us. He wants to make us slaves. He wants to take all our animals away from us, and he wants to rule over us. But we went to Joseph's house, and his servant spoke to him at the door. And when he come out, we said, Master, we have came here. Did you hear what they called me? They called me Master. We go back to the first of this story when I had my dreams about the stars bowing down before me. And they've already bowed down before me one time, and now they're bowing down again. And it's not the last time that they're going to bow down before me. They continued to bow down before me. And they come here once again, he said, to buy food. And we started explaining to him real quick, while we wanted to way home last time that you sent us back, we found the money in the top of our sacks. And we want to give that back to you too, because it don't belong to us. Rightfully, it's not ours. And we brought more money to pay for more food. But the servant told us that it's all right, don't be afraid. Your God, the God of your father, must have put the money back in your sacks. So he knew where it come from, but he told us that God must have put the money back in our sacks. And then they brought Simeon out to us, and he was fine. He'd been taken care of real well. In fact, he looked better than we did. We were starving to death, and he was being fed. And he looked really good. And they took us into Joseph's house. And they gave us water. They washed our feet. They gave our donkeys some food and water, and took care of them. And we at that time were preparing this gift that we were going to give Joseph when he arrived at noon. And he came home. Guess what I found when I came home? There's my brothers. And guess what they did as soon as I walked in? They bowed down to the ground in front of me. I asked them I said, how are y'all doing? How is your father doing? You told me how he was before. Is he still alive? And they told me that their father was doing. They told me, said, your father's doing well. Now, in your Bible, they said, and they bow down even lower. Now they're really bowing down before me. And I saw my brother Benjamin. Now, I hadn't seen my brother Benjamin in over 13 years, my baby brother. We had the same mother, Rachel. And I asked them so they wouldn't know who I was, is this your younger brother? I knew who it was. Is this the one you told me about? And they said, yes, this is Benjamin. And I looked at him and I said, God be with you, son. And then I had to leave because I couldn't hold the tears back any longer, and I sure didn't want them to see me crying. They'd bowing down before me, and it would be a dead giveaway if I started crying in front of them. So I left, and I come back after I had freshened up, and I cried. Won't be the last time I cried. And then I told them to serve the meal. I sat at my table. We set all the brothers at a table and all the servants from Egypt at a separate table. This was the tradition because the Egyptians didn't like to eat with the Hebrews. So we separated them all. My brothers were seated right in front of me, just like you are sitting. I'm sitting there looking at every one of them. And guess how I set them down at the table? In the order of their age. You know, it didn't come to their mind right then, but when they got to looking around from the oldest to the youngest, they started looking at each other like, what's going on here? This man even knows, you know, the order of our birth. They took food from my table and they put it on the table where my brothers were. And when they got to Benjamin, they gave him 5 times more than they did the other brothers. 5 times more. That put them to thinking. They said, younger brother, maybe it's just because he's younger brother, he gets more to eat. But I gave a command again for the servant after this meal to fill the men's sack with as much grain as they could carry and put each man's money back in the sack again. And then I told him, I said, put my silver cup in the sack of the youngest brother. My favorite silver cup that I drank out of, I said, put it in the youngest brother's sack. And they were sent away. They were sent back home, and not far from the city, I asked one of my servants, I said, go after them. And when you catch up with them, ask them this question for me. Why have you paid back evil for good? And then tell them that the cup that I drink out of had been stolen, that one of those stole the cup. And they denied it. You know, why would we do that? We even brought you money back, you know, from what was in the sacks before, and we don't even know how it got there. So why would we take the cup? But they did. They took their sacks off and they opened them up, and guess where the silver cup was? The silver cup was in Benjamin's bag, just as I told the servant to put it there. But I had made the decree that ever who I find that silver cup in, you tell them that that person is going to die if you find the cup in there, and it was Benjamin's. So they lowered their sacks, and when Benjamin opened the bag and there was that silver cup, this is something traditionally that we done when we were very upset. They tore their clothes. They just ripped their clothes. You know, it was a symbol of that they were very upset. But they put their sacks back on their donkeys and they all came back to town. And they all went back to my house. And I was still there. I was waiting for them, actually. It says, so the first thing they did, they bowed down again, face down on the ground. And I asked them, I said, what have you done? Judah called me master. He said, Master, what can we say and how can we show that we're not guilty? What have we got to do? God has uncovered our guilt, he said, so that all of us will be your slaves and not just Benjamin, but don't kill Benjamin. We'll all be your slaves. But I told him, I said, I will not make you all slaves. Only the man that stole the cup will be my slave. And the rest of you can safely go back to your father. In other words, I told him I got to keep Benjamin here, and the rest of you are free to go. Judah was still speaking up plainly. He was a little bit angry. And he told me, he said, I know you're a powerful person in Egypt. You're the most powerful person other than Pharaoh himself. When we were here before, he looked at me and he said, you asked us, do you have a father or a brother? And we told you our father was old. We told you we had a younger brother. We answered everything truly to you. We didn't try to hide anything to you. And you wanted us to bring our brother to you. We did exactly the way you told us to do. And now you're going to keep him here. Not only, you said the one that found the cup would die, but not only is he going to die, it's going to kill our father too when we come back and we don't have his baby with us, his child, his young child. They went through that whole story just begging me about this youngest brother and telling me that they can't go back and tell their father that. The longer they talked, the more I couldn't control myself. Not with anger, but I had to leave again and go cry some more. I didn't want to cry in front of them. So I cried, but then when I come back, I told all the servants in the house, y'all leave. I just want these brothers here. I need to tell them something. And when only my brothers were left in that house, I told them who I was. I'm Joseph, your brother. As soon as I told that, I cried again. I cried so loud this time all the Egyptians outside the house heard me crying. It was a happy cry. I am Joseph, and the first thing that I want to know is my father's still alive. But, they couldn't even answer me. They were in shock. They were all standing there looking at me like, how could this be? And they even became more afraid of me after they found out that I was still alive. I told him, I said, come close to me. Come close to me. And when they come close to me, he said, I'm your brother Joseph, whom you sold as a slave to go into Egypt. I told him not to be worried. I told them not to be angry at themselves because you sold me here. Because number one, you didn't do it. God sent me here ahead of you to save people's lives. And that's what I'm doing right now, is saving people's lives. We stored up food when we had years of plenty, and we've got plenty of food. No food is grown, I told them, in this land for 2 years. And there's 5 more years to go. So God sent me ahead of you. God made this all possible. God put me where I am. You didn't. You threw me in the pit. You sold me. But it was all in God's plan. You didn't realize that. It took me a while to realize it also, that everything that happened to me, God had a plan. God had a way to put me in something. He had a way to get me out of it. But it was all in God's plan. So it wasn't you that sent me here to start with. It was God. He said, I told him, I said, I'm in charge of this whole palace. I'm master of all the land of Egypt. So here's what I want you to do. I want you to go home. I want you to tell your father that your son Joseph says, God made me master over Egypt. Tell your father that I'm still alive, that his son is not dead. And then I want you to come back here. Bring your children with you. Bring your whole family with you. Everybody that's in your family, I want them to come here. And when you go before the king, when you come back, he's going to ask you, what do you do? And you tell him you're shepherds. Egyptians don't like shepherds, And when you tell them you're shepherds, they're going to send you down south a little bit farther to Goshen, and that's some prime land. You're going to have the prime land, and the king's going to ask you, where do you want to stay? And just tell them you want to stay in Goshen. That'd be fine with them because you'll be away from the Egyptians, and they don't like shepherds anyway, and that way you can tend your flocks, and everything's going to be good. He said, now you can see yourselves. You can see what you've done. I get to see my brother Benjamin that I never thought I would see again. I get to see all of you. Even what you did to me, you're still my brothers. So they went back and they told their father what I had told them and what I had said. And they loaded up and they came to Egypt. My father was glad to see me, as any father would be. Jacob came to Egypt. Now, you know in your lifetime and the stories you read in your Bible what takes place later on in the land of Goshen. It starts out with 70 people. And God told me to bring you here. And God also said that he would get you out of here at a particular time. So there's another promise you can look forward to. So everybody brought their own children. I had my 2 sons, and counting them too, all the people of Jacob were 70 people, as I said a while ago. As soon as I saw my father, y'all might think I'm a crybaby, is what you call people, but I cried again. I was so happy to see my father that I'd never thought I would see again. And I hugged him. And I didn't just hug him. I hugged him for a long time. It was a long hug. He looked at me and he says, now I'm ready to die. It made his life. It didn't just make his day. It made his life. He said, I'm ready to die because I've seen your face again. And I know you're still alive. So I went and told the king that my family was here. And he asked us what we did, and we did what Joseph told us to. We told him we were shepherds, that we take care of farm animals, and our ancestors did the same thing, and it was a tradition in our family to do that. And if you allow us, let us go to the land of Goshen, because there's a lot of stuff down there we can keep our animals alive until this famine's over. And so they went and stayed in Goshen. I chose 5 of my brothers to introduce to the king. And there again, he asked them, what work do you do? He said, we're shepherds. And we've come to live in this land. The king blessed them, told them to go ahead, to go to Goshen. That was their land and their land only. Then I went and got my father and brought him into the king. People's proud of their fathers. And I was proud to say to Pharaoh, this is my father, Jacob. And you know what Jacob did? He blessed the king. He blessed the king. The king asked, my father said, how old are you? My father said, I'm 130 years old. He said, but I had ancestors that lived much longer than that. 130 years old. And now he's back with all his sons, living in a different land, living in a land where they can live because the famine was so great. And we made rules and regulations of what people did with the grain they grew. 1/5 of it went to the king. But this story that I've been telling you for the last couple of weeks had 6 things I want you to remember. Number 1, God knew what he was doing when he put me in the pit. No one had to ask God, can we put him in the pit? My brothers threw me in the pit, but God knew what he was doing when he put me in the pit. My brothers didn't put me in the pit. God put me in the pit. God has ways, and they're always better than our ways. There was a lot of times during my life I thought I knew better ways, but God showed me different ways. So number two, we got to remember that God's ways are always, not part of the time, but are always better than our ways. And number three, God knows you better than he knows himself, than you know yourself. He knows you better than you know yourself. And here's one that I really wanted to stress. God has the ability to place us where he wants us. Sometimes we might not agree with where he has put us, but God has a way of placing you where he wants you to be. You're here tonight for a purpose. God put you here tonight. Number 5, purpose. That word purpose, there's a purpose for everything. Sometimes we, as individuals, lose focus on our purpose, what our purpose is. And we lose that focus because we're trying to do things ourselves. We're trying to do them with our objectives, trying to do them our way. So we have a purpose. But I told my brothers one thing I don't want you to ever forget. I told them, I said, you meant it for evil, what you did to me. You were evil. You meant it for evil. But listen, God meant it for good. It was God's plan. God meant it for good. And what I was telling them is, yes, I forgive you. There's no other way to do things except forgive you for what you've done, because it was all God's plan to start with. Sure, you sat down and thought about it, you planned it out, and you planned to throw me in the pit, but God threw me in the pit, and he meant it for good, even though you were doing it for evil. So, when you're out and about and trying to do things your own way, remember that God's always in control. God always has his way. He puts us into places we need to do, we need to be. He puts us there for a purpose, and he always means it for good. God will never do anything to you for evil. People will do to you for evil, but God always does it to you for good. I've enjoyed being here the last few weeks. I'm going back to sleep. Brother Jimmy, would you dismiss us?